Reading a book aloud to children is a prototypical part of the early education classroom day and routine. So it's something that most, if not all, teachers do on a regular basis. They gather all the children together and they read to them. And what's great about the read aloud is that teachers can manipulate it to make it a very, very powerful teaching routine. So for instance, instead of just reading a book and asking a few questions, talking about the pictures, the teachers can do things like point out complicated vocabulary words. Maybe you're reading a book and the word encounter shows up. Well, that's kind of a tough word for a little kid. They might not have heard that word many times before. And the teacher can use the read aloud to stop and define and talk about that word encounter right there in the middle of the read aloud. The teacher can do the same thing if maybe there's interesting components of the text, like a word is written very, very large to convey something like anger or fear. And the teacher can use that as really an opportunity to explicitly teach children about interesting functions and forms of print. So the great thing is today there is a very large repertoire of great kids books that are out there. We have a lot of new children's author illustrators who are playing with text, ways of presenting books to children. There's all these neat books that are out there, and the teacher can use these as a way to explicitly teach new words, new print forms and functions, and in that way it makes the typical read aloud a much more rich instructional routine. So when teachers read aloud to the students in their classroom, either as a whole group or maybe small group or one-on-one interactions, there's just a few techniques that teachers could adopt right away that are going to make this a richer instructional routine for kids. Number one, pointing to the print and talking about the print that happens in the book. Surprisingly, this is something that we don't often do as adults reading with kids, but if you can just track the print as you read, point out some interesting words when they happen, talk about the print that happens in the book. That's the first thing we can do when we read to make this a much more enriching activity. The second one is I would ask hard questions. Too often when we read with kids, we ask them these boiled down questions. What's on his head? What color is this? What shape is that? Those don't challenge kids. So what we want to do is ask them questions that are challenging and difficult, like, what do you think is going to happen next? And why in the world did he do that? And has something like that ever happened to you before? And we call those cognitively challenging questions because kids have to stretch their thinking to reason and infer and problem solve. The third thing I would do to really maximize the daily read aloud is talk about lower frequency words that show up in these books. So words like power or wisdom or fortunate or mention, awesome, abstract, imagine. These words are in kids' books, these lower frequency words, and we need to talk about them. Use the read aloud as an opportunity to really dig into some of these harder words. And the research is very clear that conversations about hard words embedded in storybook reading routines helps kids develop deep representations of those words' meanings. So those are three really simple things you can do when you read books with kids. You can talk about the print, point to the print as you read, ask cognitively challenging questions, and then also embed explicit conversations about some of the harder words that you encounter.